The room went silent, not because a price had been named, but because the most dangerous man in the room didn't look at the money. He looked at her, the maid, and in that moment, everything changed. Before we go any further, take 1 second and tell me where you're watching from. And if you like stories that pull you in and don't let go, subscribe now. This one gets deeper. Everyone at the table felt it. That shift. The kind that happens when a deal stops being business and becomes personal. The offer had been simple. Name your price. Cash. Territory. Silence. That was how wars ended in rooms like this. But the maid wasn't supposed to be part of the negotiation. She was invisible. She poured drinks. She kept her eyes down. She existed only when spoken to. Until the man everyone feared leaned back, calm, unhurried, and let his gaze settle on her like a final decision. No words. No explanation. Just a look that said, "She's mine." And the rival across the table realized, too late, that he had already lost. The rival's hand tightened around his glass, but he didn't lift it. He didn't need to. He already knew what that look meant. The maid stood frozen beside the table, her fingers stiff around the tray. She had felt eyes on her before, judging, dismissive, cruel, but this was different. This gaze didn't strip her down or push her aside. It weighed her, like she mattered. Her heart began to race, not because she understood what was happening, but because the air in the room had changed. The men had stopped talking. The room had stopped breathing. Even the quiet hum of the city beyond the glass walls felt distant. She kept her eyes lowered. She had learned long ago that looking up at powerful men only brought trouble. But the silence stretched. And stretched. The rival finally spoke, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. "That's not funny," he said. "She's staff." The man with white hair didn't look away. "She's what?" he asked calmly. The question was soft, almost polite. That made it worse. The rival straightened. "She doesn't belong in this. Name something else." Still, the gaze didn't move. The maid's breath came shallow now. She could feel it. Whatever decision had just been made, it had nothing to do with her consent. Her name hadn't been spoken. It never was. In rooms like this, people like her were background noise. Until they weren't. "She belongs exactly where I decide," the man said. "Not raised. Not threatened. Certain." The rival's face hardened. "You're crossing a line." A faint smile touched the man's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You invited me to." That was when it became clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was a claim. The maid's fingers trembled. A drop of wine spilled onto the polished wood, dark against the surface. She moved to wipe it instinctively, murmuring an apology under her breath. No one acknowledged it. Except him. "Leave it," he said. She froze again. That was the first time he had ever spoken directly to her. 2 words. Come. Controlled. But they landed heavier than any shout she'd ever endured. Slowly, she straightened, her eyes lifting despite herself. Just enough to meet his gaze. And for a split second, the world narrowed to the space between them. She didn't see cruelty there. She didn't see hunger. She saw intent. The rival pushed his chair back abruptly. "You don't get to humiliate me like this." "I'm not humiliating you," the man replied. "You did that yourself when you said name your price." Silence again. The maid felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Fear, but sharpened into something else. Because whatever this was, it meant she was no longer invisible. And invisibility had been the only thing keeping her safe. The rival exhaled slowly, as if calculating the cost of pushing further. He glanced at her then, really looked at her for the first time, and his expression flickered with irritation. As if only now realizing she was human. "You can't just take her," he said. The man with white hair leaned forward, resting his elbows lightly on his knees. "I can," he said. "And I will." There was no triumph in his voice. Only finality. That was the moment the maid understood something was ending. The life she knew. The rules she had survived by. The quiet suffering she had learned to carry without complaint. She didn't know what waited on the other side of this choice. But she knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, a dangerous thought surfaced for the first time in her life. What if this wasn't the beginning of her destruction? What if it was the beginning of her escape? Before we continue, take 1 second and tell me where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories that build slowly and then refuse to let go, subscribe now. Because once this door opens, there's no turning back. The decision didn't end the meeting. It detonated it. The rival stood first, pushing his chair back with deliberate force, as if noise could reclaim control. The scrape of wood against polished floor echoed too loudly in the quiet office. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You think this ends here?" The man with white hair didn't rise. He didn't even adjust his posture. He simply watched. Mistakes were emotional. This wasn't. The maid stood frozen, her tray still balanced in trembling hands. No one had told her to leave. No one had told her to stay. And in that silence, she understood something she'd learned too young. When powerful men argued, people like her were collateral. The rival's gaze snapped to her again, sharper this time. Calculating. "You have no idea what you're stepping into," he said, not to the man across the table, but to her. Her chest tightened. The white-haired man finally stood. He was taller than she expected. Broader. Calm in a way that felt practiced, deliberate. He straightened his jacket with unhurried precision and turned slightly, placing himself, not fully, but enough, between her and the rival. That single movement rewrote the room. "She doesn't need to," he said. "That's my responsibility now." Now. The word landed like a door closing. The rival laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You don't own her." "No," the man replied evenly. "But you don't either." That was when the tension tipped from hostile to dangerous. The rival took a step forward. Just one. Close enough that the maid could smell the sharp bite of wine on his breath. Her instinct screamed to step back, to shrink, to disappear, but she couldn't. Her legs refused to move. The white-haired man's voice dropped. "I wouldn't." That was all. The rival stopped. Not because of volume. Because of certainty. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the rival exhaled, slow and controlled, as if filing the moment away for later. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," came the reply. "For tonight." Security appeared as if summoned by the pause itself. The rival shot her one last look, resentment sharp, wounded pride burning, and then he was gone. The doors closed behind him with a final, heavy sound. Only then did the maid realize her hands were shaking badly enough that the tray rattled. She lowered it carefully onto the table, eyes still downcast. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to spill earlier." The man turned to her. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. Not loud, not aggressive, but precise. Controlled. His eyes were dark and unreadable, his expression impossible to soften or harden. "You don't need to apologize," he said. No one had said that to her in years. She swallowed. "Sir, I should return to my duties." "You won't be," he replied. Her heart stuttered. "I'll have my people take care of the details," he continued, already moving toward the door. "You'll come with me." The word with echoed louder than it should have. She hesitated. I don't have permission." He paused, just long enough to glance back at her. "You don't need it." She followed him out of the office on legs that barely felt like her own. The elevator ride down was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that pressed against her ears until her thoughts grew louder than reason. Where were they going? What did he expect from her? Was this protection, or another cage? She kept her eyes fixed on the numbers lighting up above the doors, counting them like a lifeline. When the elevator stopped, she expected the cold night air. Instead, she was guided through a private underground garage toward a black car that looked more like a statement than transportation. A man opened the door for her. "For you," he said gently. She hesitated again. The white-haired man watched her from the other side of the car. Not impatient. Not irritated. Waiting. She slid inside. The door closed with a soft, final click. As the car pulled away, The city lights streaked past the windows like something she was leaving behind rather than traveling through. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap, knuckles pale. "I don't understand," she finally said. Her voice came out small. "Why me?" The car was quiet for a moment. "Because you were never meant to be invisible," he said. That wasn't an answer. But it wasn't nothing either. They didn't speak again. When the car stopped, she looked up at a place that didn't feel real. Tall gates. Clean lines. A house that looked less like a home and more like a fortress built for comfort rather than war. Inside, everything was quiet. Soft. Warm. A woman approached her almost immediately. Older, composed, with eyes that saw without judging. "You must be tired," she said kindly. "Come. I'll show you where you'll be staying." Staying. The word echoed again. The room she was given was larger than the space she had shared with two others back at the house she came from. The bed was untouched. The sheets smelled clean. There was a bathroom attached. Private. She stood in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. The woman noticed. "Is something wrong?" She shook her head quickly. "No. I don't want to do anything wrong." The woman's expression softened. "You're safe here." Safe. She nodded, though she didn't yet know what that meant. That night, she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar quiet. No shouting. No slammed doors. No footsteps pacing outside her room. Just silence. And somewhere beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else began to stir. Relief. The next morning came too quickly. She rose early out of habit, dressing carefully in the same worn uniform she'd arrived in. When she stepped into the hallway, she expected to be corrected, redirected, ordered. Instead, she was met with calm greetings, nods, respect. It unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. She was pouring tea later that morning when she felt it again, that unmistakable awareness of being watched. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Still, she did. Their eyes met across the room. There was no hunger there, no judgment, only assessment, thoughtful, measuring, and something else she couldn't name. He looked away first. That should have comforted her. Instead, it left her with a question she couldn't quiet. Why did it feel like she'd been chosen for more than protection? Why did it feel like this man saw something in her she had spent years being taught didn't exist? And if that was true, what would it cost her to find out? So tell me, if you were her, would you trust the silence that follows power? Or fear the moment it finally speaks? The first rule she learned in the new house was simple. Nothing was accidental. Every movement had purpose. Every silence carried meaning. Even kindness here felt deliberate, measured, intentional, as if it had been tested before being offered. That unsettled her. She moved through the day carefully, half expecting someone to remind her she didn't belong. But no one did. The staff spoke to her like an equal. Some even deferred to her, stepping aside in hallways, offering help before she asked. It made her chest tight. Back where she came from, respect had been something you earned by disappearing. Here it was given too easily. By the third day, she realized something else. She was never alone, but she was never watched openly either. Guards moved quietly. Cameras blended into corners. Protection wrapped around the house like a second set of walls. Around her. Not once did anyone tell her she couldn't leave. That frightened her more than locked doors ever had. That afternoon, she stood in the kitchen staring at a bowl of untouched fruit, her thoughts spiraling until a calm voice broke through. "You haven't eaten." She turned sharply. He stood a few steps away, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to expose the tattoo along his wrist. He hadn't announced himself. He never did. "I wasn't hungry," she said quickly. He studied her for a moment. "That's not what your body says." Heat rushed to her face. "I'm fine." He nodded once, accepting the answer without believing it. "Sit." It wasn't a command. That somehow made it harder to resist. She sat. He poured water into a glass and slid it toward her across the counter. Their fingers didn't touch, but the space between them felt charged anyway. "You don't owe anyone here anything," he said. "Not work. Not gratitude. Not obedience." She wrapped her hands around the glass. Then why am I here? The question had been clawing at her since the first night. His gaze held steady. Because I didn't like the way you were treated. That was it. No speech. No justification. No explanation that made sense of everything he'd risked. Her throat tightened. People don't do that. I do. She searched his face for something. Pity, expectation, a hidden cost, but found none. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, he said. You decide who you want to be when no one is hurting you. The words landed heavier than threats ever had. That night, sleep came in fragments. Dreams of hallways she couldn't escape. Voices calling her name without sound. Hands reaching for her, pulling her back into a life she no longer recognized. She woke just before dawn, heart racing. For the first time in years, there was no immediate fear waiting for her when she opened her eyes. Only space. By the end of the week, the world outside the gates remembered her existence. It happened in a grocery store. She had insisted on going herself. Small things first, she'd said. Independence in pieces. The older housekeeper had smiled and agreed, assigning a guard who kept his distance, pretending not to watch. She was comparing prices when she felt it. That old sensation. The one that told her to brace. She turned slowly. Her former life stood a few feet away. The woman's eyes raked over her first, head to toe, lingering on the new coat, the calm in her posture, the absence of fear. Then the man beside her noticed too. Recognition hit like a slap. Well, the woman said sharply. Look who decided to upgrade. The air thinned. I didn't know they let staff wander off now, the man added. Or did you run away? People nearby pretended not to hear. They always did. She felt the familiar instinct rise, apologize, explain, shrink, but something stopped her. Not strength. Not confidence. Distance. She wasn't theirs anymore. I work elsewhere now, she said. The woman laughed. Of course you do. Her hand shot out suddenly, gripping her arm hard enough to hurt. Don't act like you're better than us. The guard moved instantly. So did he. The store seemed to hold its breath as the white-haired man stepped between them, his presence shifting the balance of the room in seconds. Let her go, he said. The woman scoffed. Who do you think you are? He didn't answer her. He looked at the man instead. The one who had signed her paychecks. The one who had looked away every time she cried. Recognition flickered. Fear followed. Hands released her arm immediately. You don't touch what's under my protection, he said softly. The silence that followed was absolute. People stared. Phones hovered. The woman's face drained of color. This isn't over, the man muttered. It is, he replied. And you should be grateful I'm generous. They left without another word. In the car, her hands shook uncontrollably. I didn't want trouble, she whispered. You didn't cause it, he said. You survived it. That night, consequences began to unfold. Accounts froze. Contracts dissolved. Partners vanished. The empire that once stood tall on intimidation and neglect began to crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, but efficiently. She heard whispers of it through staff conversations, caught glimpses of news headlines scrolling past screens. He never spoke about it. Until she asked. Is it because of me? She said one evening, standing at the edge of his office. He looked up slowly. It's because of choices. That answer told her everything. Days later, the apology came. Public. Recorded. Carefully worded. They stood before cameras and admitted wrongdoing. Admitted cruelty. Admitted guilt. They asked for forgiveness. From her. She watched from the side of the room, heart pounding. The weight of it pressed down hard. Years of silence suddenly demanding resolution. He didn't look at her. He didn't guide her. He didn't rescue her from the moment. He let her choose. I accept your apology, she said at last. But I don't forgive you. Gasps rippled. I accept it because I'm done carrying what you gave me. But you don't get access to me again. Ever. She walked away before they could respond. Later, alone, the tremors came. He found her in the garden, sitting on a stone bench, staring at nothing. You were strong, he said. I was terrified, she replied. They're not opposites. She exhaled shakily. Why are you doing all this? He considered her carefully. Because power means nothing if it's only used to take. For the first time, she saw the weight he carried. Not arrogance, not control, but responsibility sharpened by regret. Something shifted then. Not romance. Not comfort. Understanding. And with it came a dangerous question she hadn't dared to ask before. If this man could change her life so completely, what would it mean to stand beside him, not under his protection, but as his equal? And would choosing that future cost her the safety she had just begun to feel? Before we continue, tell me this. Do you think power redeems a man, or only reveals who he's always been? The apology didn't bring peace. It brought attention. Within days, her face was everywhere. Blurred in some clips, clear in others. Headlines danced around her name without ever saying it outright. Former maid at center of corporate scandal. Powerful businessman admits wrongdoing. Quiet woman refuses forgiveness. She tried not to look. Tried to stay inside the walls that had begun to feel like shelter instead of confinement. But the world had noticed her. And the world never noticed gently. One evening, as dusk settled into the garden and the lights flickered on one by one, she found him standing at the edge of the terrace, phone pressed to his ear. He wasn't speaking loudly, but his tone was clipped, precise. The kind of voice that ended conversations before they began. Yes, he said. I'm aware. A pause. No, he continued. She doesn't need to see that. Another pause. Longer this time. If anyone approaches her without my consent, he finished calmly, we'll have a problem. He ended the call and turned. He hadn't known she was there until their eyes met. They're pushing, she said quietly. Yes. Because of me. Because they think you're leverage. The word made her stomach twist. I don't want to be that, she said. You aren't, he replied. They're just late to understand it. She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking in a way that felt intentional now. Not rushed. Not forced. Just honest. What happens if I leave? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. That depends, he said at last, on whether you want to run or choose. The question lingered between them long after he walked away. That night, she packed a small bag. Not because she planned to go, but because she needed to know she could. She sat on the bed staring at it, fingers resting on the zipper, heart racing as if she were already halfway out the door. 4 years, survival had meant staying small, staying still, staying unseen. Now she had space. And space demanded decisions. A knock came softly at the door. She didn't answer at first. It's me, came the calm voice. She opened it. He stood there without his jacket, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly undone. Less armor. More man. You don't have to stay, he said. I know. But if you do, he continued, it won't be because you owe me. She searched his face. Then why did you choose me? He didn't look away this time. Because you reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. Her breath caught. What? Innocence, he said. And the cost of ignoring it. They stood in silence, the air thick with things neither of them had said. I don't want to be protected forever, she said. I wouldn't allow it, he replied. A beat. I want to learn, she continued. To work. To be more than what they made me. Then you will, he said simply. The next morning, everything changed. He didn't announce it. He didn't ask permission. He simply brought her into the room. Executives went quiet when she entered. Eyes flicked toward her, then away. The weight of the moment pressed down hard, but she kept her shoulders straight. This is her, he said. She'll be sitting in. No explanations. No justifications. Obedience followed. She listened more than she spoke. Learned the rhythm of power, the way decisions were shaped before words ever touched them. She saw how he moved through rooms, never rushing, never explaining more than necessary. And she realized something unsettling. He wasn't feared because he was cruel. He was feared because he was fair and unstoppable. Halfway through the meeting, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. She excused herself quietly and stepped into the hall. The message was short. We need to talk. In person. Her chest tightened. She knew the number. She showed it to him when she returned. His jaw set, not in anger, but in calculation. Do you want to? He asked. No, she said immediately. Then hesitated. But I think I should. He nodded once. Then you won't go alone. Before we continue, if you're still with me, pause for a second, like the video, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me in the comments. Would you have gone back to face them, or blocked the number and moved on? They met in a quiet restaurant. Neutral ground. Public enough to stay civil. The woman looked smaller than she remembered. The man older. Stripped of the power they once wore so easily. You look well, the woman said stiffly. I am, she replied. They stumbled through apologies again. Less polished this time, more desperate. Talked about pressure. About misunderstandings. About consequences. She listened. Then she stood. I didn't come for this, she said. I came to make something clear. Their eyes locked onto hers. You don't get access to my life anymore, she continued. Not my time. Not my pain. Not my future. She turned to leave. The man spoke her name. She paused, but didn't turn back. I hope you learn, she said. But you won't learn from me. Outside, the night air felt lighter. He was waiting by the car. She didn't speak until they were inside. I was afraid, she admitted. You still went, he said. She looked at him then. Really looked. So did you when you chose me. Something unspoken passed between them. Weeks later, the offer came. Not a proposal. Not yet. An invitation. To stand beside me, he said. Not behind. Not protected. Equal. Her pulse quickened. And if I say no, then I'll respect it, he replied. And protect you anyway. She smiled faintly. You don't make this easy. I don't want to. She stood at the window that night, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Once, that view would have terrified her. Reminded her how small she was. Now, it felt like possibility. But possibility always came with a price. And as she turned back toward him, one final question settled heavy in her chest. One that would decide everything that came next. Was she ready to stop being the woman who survived, and become the woman who chose? Before we go any further, take a moment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've stayed with this story this long, subscribe now. Because what happens next isn't about rescue anymore. It's about choice. The invitation didn't come wrapped in ceremony. No flowers. No speech. No promises dressed up as guarantees. It came quietly. He placed a thin folder on the table between them one evening, the city glowing behind him like a living map of everything he controlled. He didn't push it toward her. Didn't open it. Just let it exist. When you're ready, he said. She stared at it for a long time before touching it. Not because she was afraid of what was inside, but because she knew what opening it would mean. Crossing a line she couldn't uncross. I don't want to be saved, she said finally. He nodded once. I never tried to save you. I don't want to be protected like a possession. You aren't. I don't want to owe you my life. His gaze softened, not weakened, but human. Then don't. She opened the folder. Inside were plans. Not contracts of ownership. Not restrictions. Opportunities. Education. Access. A path forward that didn't erase where she'd come from, but didn't trap her there either. You built this for me, she asked. I built it with you in mind, he replied. The rest is yours. The words settled slowly, like snow that didn't sting when it touched skin. Days passed. Then weeks. She studied, learned, spoke more in rooms that once would have swallowed her whole. She stumbled, corrected herself, asked questions without apologizing for them. And something shifted, not just in her, but in the way people looked at her. They no longer saw the uniform she used to wear. They saw her presence. That unsettled some of them. It angered others. The pushback didn't come loudly at first. It came in murmurs, side glances, invitations that stopped arriving. Smiles that didn't reach eyes. Then it came directly. A meeting she wasn't supposed to attend. A room filled with men who remembered her silence and resented her voice. One of them laughed when she spoke. Another interrupted her mid-sentence. She felt the old instinct flare, withdraw, disappear, let it pass. But she didn't. She finished her thought. Slowly, clearly, without raising her voice. The room went quiet. Afterward, she found him standing alone near the windows. "You didn't intervene," she said. "I didn't need to," he replied. The pride in his eyes startled her. Not ownership. Not satisfaction. Respect. That night, she sat across from him at dinner, the space between them charged with everything they still hadn't named. "What happens if this ends badly?" she asked. "Then we survive it," he said. "Separately or together." She studied him. "You don't fear losing me. I fear limiting you," he answered. That was when she understood the difference between control and confidence. The past didn't disappear quietly. It never does. The woman who once humiliated her appeared again, this time not pleading, not apologizing, but threatening. Lawsuits. Stories. Rumors designed to stain what had been rebuilt. The response was swift. Not violent. Not dramatic. Effective. Truth dismantled lies faster than force ever could. When the dust settled, there was nothing left to fight over. Only aftermath. One evening, she stood alone in the garden again, the place where so many turning points had passed unnoticed by the world. He joined her without a word, standing at her side, not ahead of her. "I'm tired," she admitted. "Of fighting. Of proving," she said. "Of being defined by what I escaped." He turned to her then. Fully. No walls. No strategy. "Then don't let them define the ending." She breathed out slowly. "And if I choose something ordinary?" He smiled faintly. "Ordinary is freedom when it's chosen." Silence wrapped around them. Not tense. Not heavy. Honest. "I don't want to stand beside you because you're powerful," she said. "Good. I want to stand beside you because you see me." His voice dropped. "Then stay." She did. Not that night. Not immediately. But she stayed in the way that mattered. Months later, the ceremony was small. No cameras. No spectacle. No audience hungry for symbolism. Just witnesses who mattered. She walked toward him without trembling, not because she was fearless, but because fear no longer owned her steps. When he reached for her hand, it wasn't to claim. It was to ask. She answered by placing her hand in his. Equal pressure. Equal choice. Afterward, when the world tried to label her again, maid turned wife, rescued woman, lucky survivor, she didn't correct them. She didn't need to. She knew who she was. And more importantly, who she had chosen to become. Late one night, long after the house had gone quiet, she stood at the window watching the city breathe. He joined her, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "You changed my life," she said. He shook his head. "You changed your own." She smiled. "You just refused to look away." They stood there, not as protector and protected, not as power and privilege, but as two people who had met at the edge of a decision and chosen something harder than survival. Something honest. So let me ask you this. When power looks at you and offers safety, do you take it? Or do you demand the freedom to choose what comes next?